It's time for Mr. Fundamental!
Presented by no one.
The Dallas Mavericks just came off an impressive series against the Clippers and would definitely want to build off their successful season. Brian Windhorst recently just mentioned that the Mavs are the front runners to sign Giannis next offseason, and there's no hiding what a great fit it would be next to Luka and KP. So upgrading their roster while maintaining cap flexibility would be the focus. Heading into the offseason, the Mavs have around $87 million in guaranteed salary, but there's no doubt that Hardaway Jr. will pick up his player option for almost $19 million. The Mavs don't have cap space to use, so their main source of addition is a $9 million mid-level exception, the 18th pick, and potential trades. I know free agents like Millsap, Grant, Crowder, and Bradley are great fits, but I don't think the MLE is enough to pry them away from their current teams. In terms of trade targets, the Mavs don't have enough attractive pieces and draft picks to acquire Oladipo, Holiday, DeRozan, or Beal. I think what the Mavs need to shore up is their wing defense, and there are quite a few options out there. Unless they're proven defenders, I'm looking for those who could potentially provide some offensive spark as well. Mo Harkless is probably the best wing defender free agent within the Mavs price range. He's been on contenders and rebuilding teams, but the one thing consistent was his effort and effectiveness on the defensive end. The Mavs do have Finney Smith as their primary defender, while Luka is no slouch on that end either. Besides that, their other wings are either average or below average defenders that stars could expose. Zone defense is a viable option, evident by the Heat's playoff success, but that strategy went down the drain against the Lakers. The only downside is that Harkless' shooting stroke comes and goes, and that has literally cost contenders their playoff series. The best part of the Mavs roster is the amount of shooting they have, and their 5-out lineups can minimize the impact of Harkless' cold stretches, and getting him for the MLE would be decent. Andre Roberson could be another target for the Mavs. After missing 2 seasons due to injury, Roberson finally returned to the court in the bubble. He was still able to make an impact on the court without the modern-day offensive skill set. Even if his injuries sapped him of his athleticism, I think he would still be a capable defender and share primary duties with Finney Smith. In the Clippers series, the Mavs had to throw Kleber on Kawhi or Paul George, while Finney Smith took the other, unless they wanted Curry or Hardaway Jr. on them. Luka already had so much to carry on the defensive end that they wanted to save his leg. Last season, the Mavs signed Kit Gilchrist to add another defender. He's also a non-shooter, so the Mavs has plenty of experience in incorporating non-shooters in their lineups. Roberson's track record suggests he can guard 1 through 4, which would be useful when they run into teams with perimeter star duos. The Mavs have enough shooting to surround Roberson, where he could excel as a cutter and offensive rebounder. Since most teams will stay away from a non-shooter, Roberson shouldn't cost much, and they could cut ties with him if he's struggling. Wilson Chandler is another potential target. He struggled for the last 1.5 seasons, but his frame and skill set could still be valuable for the Mavs. Among the players I've listed so far, Chandler is the only 3-and-D candidate who's been a secondary or tertiary scoring option. He's been on a downward spiral in recent years, but having a 3-and-D wing who could suddenly pop off wouldn't hurt. Again, the Mavs have enough shooting to cover for Chandler, and they could possibly nab him for the minimum, or just over the minimum. Bottom line, he could be another body to throw at stars, but also carries the potential to be a scorer or knockdown shooter. Justin Holiday is another sneaky good option. He's a typical 3-and-D wing who could guard multiple positions. He's actually been a primary scoring option before, and although it wasn't the best idea, he's more than capable of attacking closeouts and pull up for the mid-range jumper. Consistency has been his biggest enemy throughout his career. He can knock down threes, but he's never made more than 36% of his threes in a season until last year, where he hit over 40% from deep. That's going to come in handy for the Mavs, but also attract other potential suitors. Wing defense is a need, but the Mavs are lacking a backcourt defender as well. One option could be Austin Rivers. He's not the best defender out there, but he's better than you think. Rivers' willingness to hound opposing guards and recover after beaten is underrated, and even more impressive considering the Rockets went small last season. On a Mavs team with multiple rim protectors, Rivers can get even more aggressive with his defense. What makes this acquisition more appealing is his potential on offense to provide more than just shooting. He's pretty good in isolations, attacks well at the catch, and his pull-up threes are just as good as his catch-and-shoot ones. The Mavs has plenty of capable offensive guards, but Rivers provide an option to maintain their high-octane offense without sacrificing much on defense. Rivers is a player option, but with the Rockets' future in flux, the Mavs have a real chance of nabbing him for part of the MLE. Moving on to trades, I've got 4 3-and-D targets in mind. first is Tony Snell. He just had a career year with the Pistons, being the primary wing defender and nailing 40% of his 3 balls. Turning 29 in November, he doesn't fit the Pistons' rebuilding timeline, and it wouldn't cost much to get him. Best of all, he's on a 1-year contract, allowing the Mavs to add an immediate contributor without compromising their cap space next offseason. Salary matching will be a little tricky, because the Mavs need to send out just over $9 million back. DeLone Wright could fit that description, but he's been a solid contributor on the wings. Justin Jackson will be ideal as a young player and his $5 million contract, while adding Boban and Cauley-Stein, if he picks up his player option, will work in terms of money. Throwing in a second rounder would get the deal done. Another trade target is Al-Farouq Aminu. After a confusing signing with the Magic, Aminu had a short and down season. His defensive ability is undeniable, but his shooting stroke has never been above average. With the Magic's logjam in the frontcourt, this is prime time to buy low on Aminu. A swap between Justin Jackson and Aminu might already be enough to get a deal done. The only downside is that his contract is guaranteed for the next 2 seasons, which could eat into the Mavs' cap next year. On the flip side, if they really need to open up cap space next season, the Mavs has multiple great role players on cheap contracts with endless suitors. Thaddeus Young is my next selection. I know Paul Millsap has been brought up as a potential candidate, but I'm doubtful he'll accept a 1-year contract for the full MLE with the Mavs, especially when the Nuggets can offer more. Young is the lesser version of Millsap and expanded his perimeter game last year with the Bulls. His 3-ball comes and goes, but he's another defender that would allow Finney-Smith to guard the opposing best perimeter player. What he also brings is that traditional big man game of playing at the high post. He strayed away from that last year, but if the Mavs face a zone defense in the upcoming year, Young would be a viable option without sacrificing much spacing or off-the-catch creation. Young is going to be easy to acquire, since there were rumors that the Bulls are looking to move him. Best of all, his contract is only guaranteed for $6 million next offseason, allowing the Mavs to open up cap space again. Matching salaries is going to be the tricky part, but I assume Justin Jackson's $5 million contract will be included as a young piece for the Bulls. Going back to the backcourt options, getting Rodney McGruder could be a solution. He's had an up and down career so far, but the one thing that has been consistent is his toughness and defense. He was largely considered a steal when the Heat salary dumped him to the Clippers last year. Offensively, he's a willing and capable shooter and decent at attacking closeouts. That's all he needs to do in the Mavs offense, and what he does on this end is pretty much icing on the cake. The Clippers will need every single penny they can get to retain Morris and Harrell, which means McGruder's $5 million contract would be expendable. The Mavs could get this opportunity to fill a need, potentially get a second rounder, while also saving cap space next year, since McGruder's $5 million in the following year is not guaranteed. I was working on this trade near the end of the playoffs, before the news from Brian Windhorst. I know the Mavs stated that they're willing to take on large salaries, but didn't specify long-term contracts. This is also probably the closest star trade the Mavs could get with their assets. Horford might not be appealing with his contract, but he's a slight upgrade to Kleber with his passing. The Mavs struggle against zone defenses, and both Kleber and KP aren't comfortable in that area. Horford could become the answer against zone, while also providing spacing and defense. The spacing on the Sixers couldn't get any worse, so any team with slightly more shooting could see Horford bounce back. Now, absorbing Horford's contract for a slight upgrade makes no sense, but the key for this trade is Josh Richardson. He's probably one of the best non-star players with his defense, shooting, and scoring. Think of him as a slightly lesser Oladipo on a cheap role player contract. His defense is overshadowed by the likes of Simmons and Embiid. Prior to acquiring Richardson, the Sixers were rated 15th in defense and had the most games where the opposing guard had 30-point games. There was certainly an improvement this year on the defensive end, and he could do the same for the Mavs. Richardson's ability to score at 3 levels and create off the dribble will allow the Mavs to put another defender on the floor without taking away a creator. Since Kleber's 3-and-D skill set is rare, and the Mavs are selling high on Hardaway Jr. while taking on more salary, the Mavs should ask for Zaire Smith and draft assets as well. These would come in handy in the Giannis offseason, making it easier to flip Horford's contract to a rebuilding team. I came up with this trade because I remember how the Mavs struck out on stars either through trades or free agency during their Dirk Nowitzki era, and how it crippled them after the 2011 championship. But Luka and KP are more attractive stars heading into their primes, so things will be different now. Picking up Kid Gilchrist in the buyout market was an indication that the Mavs are willing to take on developmental projects. So Josh Jackson, Stanley Johnson, Dario Saric, and David Nwaba will be good pickups as well. Both Jackson and Johnson provides athletic defense with some untapped offensive potential, which the Mavs spacing could unlock. Saric had his best stretch with 4 other ball handlers in the bubble, and would help the Mavs with depth if Powell isn't 100% or injuries hit their front court again. Nwaba was having a decent season in a small role for the Nets, until injuries hit. He probably won't sustain his 43% 3-ball, but he's another defender capable of defending 1 through 4 for a very cheap price. There are still plenty of 3-and-D free agents the Mavs could target as well, like Kent Bazemore, Solomon Hill, and Courtney Lee. The biggest downfall for all of them was their contracts, but now they might not even cost $5 million a year. I haven't done my work on the draft outside the lottery yet, but they could either go with a two-way wing like Sadiq Bey, or take a high-risk, high-reward prospect like RJ Hampton or Jaden McDaniels. Of course, if any projected lottery prospects fall out of the lottery, they're in prime position to scoop them up. The Mavs already have a competitive team and could afford to gamble with their pick, similar to what the Nuggets did with MPJ and Bobo. The prospect that they draft could either blossom into a third star or become a trade chip in the future. Let me know down below whether you agree on these selections or not. Comment down if I've missed out on anything or some underrated and realistic targets that the Mavs should pursue. A lot could change over the offseason, and one small trade in the NBA could cause a ripple effect across the league, so let's see how things turn out at the end of the offseason. Thanks for making it to the end of the video. If you enjoyed it, drop a like rating down below, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.